There are few drugs in life more powerful than new love. The mere thought of it drives fantasies, hopes, and entire life directions at times. It's no grand revelation to say that love is a universal human pleasure, the ultimate passion. A great many say that it is the very purpose of life itself. This month, at least in the United States, is the month of love as we celebrate Valentine's Day on February 14th. Yet quite interestingly, for as much as we love the passion of love, the root of the word passion itself has a completely different meaning: suffering. One of the great tragedies of life, to quote the glam rock group Poison, is that every rose has its thorn. Love brings pain, hardship, and just plain challenges, and it doesn't take long before every single love runs into problems. From Narcissus and Echo to Cleopatra and Mark Antony, from Romeo and Juliet to Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. Thus, it is only good, right, and salutary that we take a moment to think deeply on love and the inevitable problems and pains it brings very shortly in its bumpy wake, no matter if it's new love in your 20s or your 80s. And yes, having done work as a nursing home chaplain, I've seen new love occur in people's 80s. The appeal of the drug perhaps never fully wanes. What makes new love so challenging? The past and red flags. This is such a multi-pronged issue of what it makes new love so challenging that it would take a lot to completely flesh out all aspects of it. But a few aspects are more important than others. The most important to always bear in mind is that love feels like a drug because it does, in fact, release various chemicals in the brain that create unrivaled highs and comforts, all of which chemicals I am completely unqualified to speak on. For our purposes here, the only thing you need to remember is that it's an extraordinary drug. For simplicity, the challenges of love can be boiled down to past, present, and future. Perhaps the greatest problem is that people come into dating in situations of liking someone, the natural precursors to love, with a past unique to them that colors and actually drives their experiences of love in the present. The past drives what they want from love, to be sure, but also how they view love. One of the most powerful things I've seen in counseling folks over the decades is how much the love they were exposed to in their childhood home creates the template for their own future conceptions of love, either what it should be or shouldn't be, as they see it. The childhood experience of love, or lack of it, by the mere fact that it lasts as their teaching model for love for years, even decades, and is being taught by the most powerful persons in their lives, mom and dad or whoever raised them, is normalized into the young person's very definition of love, or anti-love. No matter how toxic it may be, more often than not, the love the child sees as a kid, he or she then recreates in teen years and early adulthood. Monkey see, monkey do. So we respond to situations in dating like, we respond to situations in dating, like, and new love in ways that have become patternized by the repetition of parental behaviors. If a child saw a parent forever serving in love and hence another person taking and taking, it is a high likelihood that child, when finding him or herself in love, will either give and give or potentially take and take, depending on which person the child most identifies with. And this isn't just the realm of young love, folks in their teens and 20s. The imprinting of messages surrounding love is so extraordinarily powerful that people will not only be influenced by them, but be outright driven by them, even mimicking them into their 60s and 70s. I'm incapable of numbering the times I've dealt with this precise issue in clients well past middle age. But the power of the past doesn't just inform what a person does, but what they don't do, don't say, or even don't see. This is critical. It's the realm of red flags. Consider this. If little Billy grew up seeing mommy beat the hell out of daddy and shout at daddy what a piece of shit he is and how daddy's a bad provider and crappy lover, then little Billy's going to be quite likely going into dating unable to see what is acceptable and unacceptable. So if he has a girlfriend or a boyfriend who puts him, who treats him nicely and listens to him, and perhaps even kisses him or touches him softly, he's going to be over the moon because it's balm to his precious soul. But if he discovers before long that this girl who insults him, puts him down, and occasionally hits him with or without remorse, but if he discovers before long that this girl also insults him, puts him down, and occasionally hits him without or with remorse, little Billy thinks, yes, this is love, for it's precisely what was modeled as love growing up. And it comes with warm words and high feelings. Thus, it's both furry and soft and familiar. And it's that which is familiar that is often the undoing of love. What so many adults know from their own extra decades of experience is that love doesn't come without the pain. When you're used to love always coming with doses of big pain, love without big pain can be disorienting, seemingly boring, and often isn't trusted. For there's a sense that this person who is giving only loving acts and words must want something from me, and when's the other shoe going to drop? Love is never this good all the time, the person thinks. Plus, it doesn't come with the drug rush of the highs, lows, fights, fears, recoveries, and reconnections. The conditioning of familiar love causes the expectation of and allowance for pain. Let me say that again. The conditioning of the familiar, in other words, the crap that Billy grew up with, causes the expectation of and the allowance for pain, because that's precisely what Billy witnessed. So back to Billy. What is in some ways worse than Billy receiving the exact same treatment he saw modeled growing up, laced with some nice love aspects, till those likely lessen, is Billy receiving a watered down version of childhood and completely missing how bad it still is. Listen to that again. What is in some ways worse than Billy receiving the exact same treatment he saw modeled growing up and laced with some nice aspect of love now is Billy receiving a watered down version of childhood and completely missing how bad it still is. What if Billy starts dating Sally and Sally is totally verbally abusive to Billy, but Billy says she's not physically abusive. Often a person in Billy's position won't even notice the giant red flag of verbal abuse because, hey, my girlfriend doesn't beat me. This is so great. His pain meter is so completely broken that he has no baseline of a good normal. This cuts to the heart of red flags and problems in new love and really all love. Too often we spend our time and energies in love focused on the other person and how this person and all that this person is doing and how it makes me feel. But if our pain meter or feeling meter is broken, often all we can really feel is love in even the smallest of doses because it's such a powerful drug, or pain only in the highest doses because we've been so conditioned to take the pain and take it some more. The quest for the drug is so great we endure hell in small and big to get it and to keep it. If we can't feel small pain, or even if we ignore it because we so want this to be the one, or because we hope it'll go away, or that we can change this person, we lose the ability to see red flags. See, that mistake so many people make in the conversation of red flags is they think red flags are about spotting things in another person's behaviors and then walking away when those are present. But if that's your focus, you've already taken your eye off the ball. Red flags are not about watching another person's actions per se. They're not about awareness of what's going on around you. They're about awareness of what's going on inside you. The central question that must drive one's experience of love, be it young love or love well seasoned, is how does this make me feel? What's going on inside of me? Thus, anything that causes me pain, distress, distrust, sadness, or anything else unpleasurable is not okay and must be addressed, both by confronting the other person and by exploring it in my self-work. See, happiness in your relationships be they friendships, family, impassioned love, or some other, is determined in the end by how you feel and how that person feels. That's it. The problem for young Billy is that he's incapable in his present iteration of feeling what actually hurts. All he can feel is what did or didn't hurt the parents who hurt each other, or what tiny amounts he allowed himself to feel as a child because he was so numbed by the shitstorm swirling around him. Again, his pain meter is broken. The pain meter, the feeling meter, is what tells a person that this situation is not good. Young Billy is quite literally incapable of sensing or feeling that something is off here, and that something is important. Driven to tolerate pain, even if it wasn't in the form of abuse, Billy cannot sense what would be the jumping of the needle on a normal functioning pain meter. Thus, all of these red flags start just whipping by, and he's missing every single one of them, or missing half, and ignoring the other half because the good drug feels so damn good, and he's never experienced it before. Further, if the pain is not independent of the love meter, the love, sex, affection, and kind words can infect and override the pain meter readings. You have to have a love meter and a pain meter. And it's very easy to let what's going on the love meter, which feels so high, to override the pain meter and just sort of ignore the pain meter. As mentioned, this conditioning from childhood, this conditioning to override pains can happen just as easily in non-abusive and even loving homes. I grew up in a large family with unequivocally loving parents. There were no raised voices, no criticism, and there was lots of love given by both parents to each other. Thus, it would seem that my 5 siblings and I would be all set for terrific love later. And we were, and weren't. At least not me. See, I was conditioned with 2 very powerful things. 1, the inevitable fight in big families to get my love cup filled with positive attention, which is no small feat when you're competing with 5 siblings and a father who, while a very good man, had high attention needs. And 2, an adored and respected mother who gave and gave and gave and gave and gave to her kids, spouse, and just about everyone else. So I went into teen and adult dating with a high need for attention because I hadn't gotten it growing up, not enough, and preconditioned drive to give and give. If I was given love, I'd go out of my way to serve and serve the one I loved. And that giving of love is actually a great model for how to exist in love and in the world, if and only if the lover you're interacting with is a giver as well. But as far too often happens in life, a giver found a taker. A person conditioned by her own pain to vacuum up as much attention, giving, and service she could because, well, her love cup had a hole in the bottom, just like mine. Whose hole was bigger is irrelevant. All that mattered, as I discovered only years after the divorce, is that my inability or unwillingness to acknowledge and act on the myriad ways pain was being inflicted on me, lack of apologies and forgiveness, near constant finger pointing, and blatantly obvious verbal and physical abuse from her, which, as a large man who was a wrestler and football player, didn't register as physically painful and thus didn't register on the pain meter of disrespect and soul pain. All of that meant they would only continue unchecked and increase. Again, let me say that. All that mattered, as I discovered only years after the divorce, is that my inability or unwillingness to acknowledge and act on the myriad ways pain was being inflicted on me meant they would only continue unchecked and increase. You see, the normalization of misbegotten forms of love can emit from even seemingly normal and good homes. Thus, a past that is not fully deconstructed and reconstructed in new forms can destroy both love and the individuals in that love. What should be red flags, i.e. that which hurts me, are missed, ignored, or wished away because love is so craved and the pain meter broken or zeroed out at unhealthily high levels. So there are problems existing in new love which can perpetuate long into old love that have nothing to do with the proverbial communication, which everyone says is the key to success in love. The impact of the past on the present when it comes to love really has nothing to do with communication with your partner, but more about communication with your own damn self. But even that communication with the messages of your own soul isn't so much about communicating, but courage. The courage to go into it all, face it, and begin to do the work of healing it. Now, one little caveat. There are so many people that say, well, Sven, your definition of red flags, just those things that hurt me or offend me or whatever, that's not real red flags. That's more just like things I don't like. But what people don't understand who say this is that those things they call real red flags, like, oh, he's a psychopath or she's a total narcissist, or that all of those things start small. They start small. They don't start big. Well, how the hell are you going to pick it up if it starts small? You know, they don't come in on the second date raging and fucking hitting you and shit like that. No, because that would be an obvious, well, I'm out of here. Fuck you, right? No. It starts small. It starts by ignoring you or going silent on you. It starts by them not apologizing. It starts by them having no interest in changing their behavior when you tell them that they hurt you. It starts small. And if I don't catch it or I just try to wish it away, then I'm giving that behavior permission. When I'm working with people who have been victims of abuse or harsh treatment in a relationship, in addition to getting out all the pain and so forth, what I begin teaching them is the word no. What I begin teaching them is how to establish and maintain healthy boundaries, right? Well, that implies, why would I be teaching them no and boundaries? So that in their next relationship, this doesn't happen again. So that in the beginning, they'll say no and hold their boundaries. Well, that was the problem back here. We have to say no. We have to hold our boundaries when it's small. Because it always starts small, then another small one, then another small one, and they begin to add up. And by the time it gets big, you realize it's big, but it's already too late because you've been allowing so many things building up to that. That's why the beginning of a relationship is so critical. And red flags start small. All right. The present and the future. But even if past imprints of what is and isn't love are sorted out, there is a normal bumping against each other's experiences of wants and love let me try that one again. But even if past imprints of what is and isn't love are sorted out, there's a normal bumping against each other's experiences of and wants from love. What I want to have, do, or feel in love inevitably knocks into or rubs against what you want for love. Hence, conflict arises. If you both have a well-tuned and independently functioning pain meter and love meter, then you can articulate what you are feeling and what you are wanting. Then, disappointments and bruised egos can be discussed and sorted out, as can wants and needs. This is where communication comes in, specifically communication with the lover based on internal communication with one's own pain and love meters, as felt on the skin, in the gut, on the heart, in the peace or unrest of the mind. Similarly, long-term visions for love and the relationship create challenges and hardships in the present, either because one or both person is withholding what they really want or don't want for their own future, or because one or both person isn't fully clear. The lack of clarity is driven by someone who isn't fully formed yet and, resultingly, doesn't know who the hell they truly are. Thus, they may commit to things they later discover they don't really want, or vice versa. Interestingly, the person who withholds what they really want or outright lies about it is not fully formed either, as evidenced by the fact that they lack the courage and integration of self to simply be on the outside who they really are on the inside. That is the mark of someone who either doesn't know their authentic self or is terrified to be it, both of which are signs of someone who is not living fully authentically. Tragically, so many marriages are built on two individuals who are not fully formed, not living fully authentically, or just plain unhealed from a past of trauma, or just unmet love needs. So they are building a relationship based on adapted versions of their authentic self, or just an outright version of themselves that is nowhere near their authentic self. That is why in my counseling of couples, I am never about saving the relationship, and never bring the couple together in session until I've done extensive counseling of each individual. I'm about helping two individuals become their most authentic self, and then, and only then, decide, well, do I want to spend my life with this person? I can now clearly see. And the other person is saying the same thing. Do I want to spend my life as, now that I'm my fully authentic self, looking at this person, do I want to spend my life with that person? If two individuals are not brought to a state of authenticity before deciding on the relationship, they will only continue to build or destroy a relationship based on preconditioned and ultimately false and unhappy versions of themselves. Failure in the form of misery is all but inevitable. How important is dating and new love in the real life of a relationship? One of the most eye-opening things I've learned over the last 30 years of counseling people when it comes to love is the supreme importance of the beginning. I used to view it as an almost insignificant prelude to the real show, but it's so much more than that. Hell, in some ways, it's much more important. Values and wants are established, yes, but perhaps most importantly, patterns get set in place. Little red flags, little offenses, little hurts are either tolerated, allowed, or called out and rectified now, in the moment. If there's one thing I've seen clearly when it comes to crap in long-term relationships, it's that little things become big things, as I mentioned. Always. If a person is preconditioned to miss or just allow red flags to pass by, preconditioned to not call it out when they have been hurt or felt criticized or minimized, their inaction teaches the other person that behavior, that hurt is okay. So without the no from the hurt person, the one who caused the pain has a green light to do it again. Why wouldn't they do it again? They have no reason to believe they ought not. But if the hurt one does, in fact, stand up, identify the act and pain, and insist on an apology, but the other denies it, deflects, dodges, or defends the action, that too is a gift, odd as it may sound. For the one who caused the pain is conveying very clearly the message, you don't matter, your needs, your wants, and your feelings. What a wonderful opportunity to see this person clearly and act decisively on walking away now. Alas, we often don't do that though. We either don't allow ourselves to feel the pain, don't acknowledge it when we do see it, don't act on it, or do act on it, but then back down when they do the denial, defense, dodge, or deflection. We let it go when they push back. This too greenlights them to do it again. But worse, it teaches them that they can steamroll you. You can be bullied. And since little things become big things, those early moments of bullying will inevitably metastasize into bigger and bigger bullying moments, spells, periods, years, and decades. Far too often, when tracking origins with a client in a bad marriage, we will drill down to discover that the frustrations and misery being experienced today don't just track back 10 or 17 years, but with increased digging, can be seen more often than not in things happening not only before the marriage, but in the very earliest moments of the relationship. No exaggeration. Little things become big things. This only highlights the importance of doing as much self-work as possible before diving into relationships. Encouraging young people to do self-work when young, even as early as teen years, will reap benefits when it comes to inevitable relationship building, whether in love, friendships, or career. What's the difference between love and infatuation? I've often thought of this question as generally offensive and condescending, as it is regularly used by the old to shame the young and their experiences, or by the bitter to hurt those in the beginnings of what could be love. Oh, so you admit, Sven, by saying what could be love, that infatuation is not love. Well, yes, because we generally think of love, at least when it's set next to infatuation, as older or more developed. But I do not extend the definition of infatuation to include less important than love. I see one as the unavoidable forerunner to love. But Sven, speaking of words and their roots, as you did earlier, the origin of the very word infatuation is, in Latin, foolish. So isn't it hard to construct an argument that infatuation is even in the same discussion of significance when it comes to love? No, I really don't. In fact, I think love, whether in its nascent or most advanced and wizened states, is impossible without foolishness. And I'm not just talking about a daily silliness. I think that even the very highest forms of love, even agape, come with an innate foolishness, at the very least, in the abnegation of the self. In terms of survival and fitness, how does it benefit the self to give away power, energy, time, resources, money, etc. to another, just to feel the joy of giving that love and seeing the other fulfilled with love? From a practical level, it serves no purpose. For if it did serve a purpose, say of securing something in return, it would be considered transactional, which could be argued then undermines the argument it is love at all. Let me read all of that to you again. I think authentic love, whether in its nascent beginning stages or its most advanced and wizened states, is impossible without foolishness. And I'm not just talking about a daily silliness. I think that even the very highest forms of love, even agape, come with an innate foolishness. At the very least, in the abnegation of self, the giving up of self. In terms of survival and fitness, how does it benefit the self to give away power, energy, time, resources, money, etc. to another, just to feel the joy of giving that love and seeing the other person filled with love? From a practical level, it serves no purpose. For if it did serve a purpose, say of securing something in return, it would be considered transactional, which could be argued then undermines the argument that it is love at all. Part of the beauty of love is how freaking stupid it is. We risk for those we love. We maybe even endanger ourselves or self-security for another. We sacrifice for this person or to be with this person, and it's madness. It's loss of seemingly practical senses and occasionally willingness to let go of control, which is rarely more than a mechanism of self-protection. Thus, to let go of control is to remove myself from the center of the universe. It is to put the lover there, which is an act of beautiful foolishness. Truth is, infatuation is a step on the journey to more developed love, as well as an ongoing aspect of well-tended love. For no one ever claimed love is always rational and always practical. Or anyone who ever did sure sounded like a clueless or rigid puke when they did. To quote Blaise Pascal, the great mathematician, the heart has its reasons that reason cannot know. Infatuation will naturally morph into love as long as it is kept in check by a well-calibrated and watched pain meter. The mistake in early phases of love infatuation is that the individual, be they 20 or 50, is only watching the actively hopping needle on the love and excitement meter, sometimes when the pain meter is just as lively. The infatuated relationship only turns into a tornado when pains cannot be ignored and start flying about, shredding everything in their path. Thus, the foolishness and madness of infatuation only become problematic when they are pursued for their own pursuit. Thus, really the difference between infatuation and love is that the former, infatuation, neither sees nor gives credence to what's happening on the pain meter. But the latter, love, does. The latter, in other words, love, considers equally important that the love meter dancing needle and the pain meter dancing needle be listened to. Too often, the infatuated see the mad movement of a hopping pain meter as necessary for or even defining true love. Do you remember Billy earlier? That once the pain was coming along with the love, he saw that as real love. Once people have the highs and the lows, and the more extreme the lows, they feel like, oh, this is real, passionate love. And as a point of fact, if someone wants to define love that way, they can. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as they're not hurting another person. But it's not anything that weaves into a long-term definition of happiness. Pain at that level will rip someone to pieces, perhaps even turning them bitter if they don't do the work to heal the pain and the pieces. I've seen people in their 40s and 50s still believing that ignoring the pain, at least until it gets too big, that version of love is what they really want. So it's not just the realm of the young. Next section. Why do we call it the L word? I've seen this thing, particularly say in the last 30 years-ish, where in a new relationship, saying I love you is held off and held off, like a lover trying to hold off an orgasm for as long as possible before the impending climax. People avoid saying love for any number of reasons, and it has become such a phenomenon that it is treated as a swear word, the L word, something to remain unspoken or only spoken when it comes with some guarantee, it seems. People fear investing too much of their heart too soon for fear of getting hurt. Others fear looking stupid by saying they're in love if they're not certain the other person feels the same way. Some even always wait for the other to say it first, which is fear poorly masking as self-control. Still, others just won't say it, whether early or ever, because perhaps they dislike how it makes them feel by doing so. Maybe it makes them feel uncomfortable or weak or vulnerable, or for the position it puts them in because now they can be hurt by this other person. The verbal expressing of love is an opening of the heart, which invariably means you can now hurt me, whether by leaving me or somehow taking advantage of this opening, this softness I'm showing. And that is a risk too great, too scary, too potentially painful for some. So they demonize the word, if not the entire concept of love itself. Or they hide behind the notion that real love is solely actions, not words. And truth be told, love is an action. But especially for men who've classically had their very sense of self defined by action, as men have always said, saying action is love or love is action is too easy. Let me read that again. But especially for men who've classically had their very sense of self defined by action, as men always have, saying action is love or love is action comes very easily for a guy. It doesn't require a stretching of self, an opening of the heart. But words, when words perhaps don't come as easily, those words have a greater impact. Opening the heart and expressing what's in it in some way other than ways that come easily, such as action, is an indicator of greater love because a person is willing to do more and risk more rather than just self-protect. But is there a downside to the use of the word love, Sven? Yes. And it has only been in my 50s that I realized I was guilty of it in younger decades. I was so naturally verbally expressive as a person, which I know you may find very hard to believe. I always, that to say I loved biking, loved working out, loved pretty flowers, or loved a woman came without thought. That is to say, I was expressing what I felt in that moment. I did, in fact, feel strong love for the person if I said it, even if it was weeks into a relationship. It's not that there was an absence of feelings behind the words. And I even equated that with wanting to be with that person forever, which I did want. And the truth is, a whole lot of people know in weeks or a few months they want to be with someone forever and then go on to do precisely that. I recall once sitting around the dinner table after some family event, all 6 of us siblings and our 6 spouses, and I asked the question of all 11 of them, when did you know that this was the person you wanted to be with forever? Every single person at that table stated in one way or another that it was in a month or less that they knew. Every single one. Today, 6 of the 12 people are still married to the person they were with that evening, 25 years later. The problem, I think, for me, was that I didn't have a fully developed sense of self to speak that love with the ability and knowledge to follow through with it tomorrow or 10 years from now. Or the other person wasn't able to follow up with the same. In other words, while I or we indeed had the feelings, our lives, values, futures were not in sync. In no small part because we were not each fully formed. So the feeling of love was based on a limited data set, rather than encompassing things like ability to date now and living situations and future plans and family expectations, etc. Further, some people, such as I did, speak of love in that state of high feeling, not aware that the other person hearing that exact same word might be interpreting it very differently than how I'm intending. As one example, Sven saying it in a state of heightened feeling which may even last months or years, may be received by a woman as a statement of commitment when I might have not implied that, at least not yet. So yes, love is a word laden with so many meanings and nuances, both implied and inferred, that its usage can be dangerous to the soul as it is beautiful to the ear and heart. So some measure of judiciousness is wise in the usage of the word, but treating it as a full-blown untouchable is way too far in that direction, because love is vulnerability and demands an opening of the soul for it to flourish. Next section. How do you know if it's a good relationship, and when do you leave? I know it's an odd thing to be discussing around Valentine's Day and the idea of new love, but it's important to keep in mind. I don't mean to sound trite, but a good relationship ultimately feels good on the whole. I had a very dear old man and woman who mentored me when I was in my late teens and living away from home. And this old man had on his business card, "A bad day of fishing is still better than a good day at work." Why he had that on his business card, I have no idea. But it underscores a point here when it comes to assessing the value or goodness of a relationship. I like to say about my girlfriend of the last 10 years, a bad month or season with her is still better than a good month or season with anyone else. And that's how I know it is a good relationship for me. We have fought loudly, lost immediate family members to death and disease. We've had problems with our shared adult children. We've gone through major career changes, enjoyed successes, and hurt each other in a variety of ways, big and small. But even amid those seasons, there was still no one I wanted more to be with or more to take the next season with. Does this relationship on the whole over time feel good? Not just today or this week, but on the whole. If you think in terms of a chart that is tracking the movement of a company on the stock market, there will be days or weeks or perhaps months where the stock is tracking, dipping, or even temporarily tracking down. But the overall long-term trajectory of the stock is upward. That's a good relationship. It may be morphing into new forms and new growth, not always in the same form it was, but the new forms feel generally good, and the forecast looks good too. But all of this fishing and market tracking can only be done with operational and fully monitored pain and love meters. Absent that, there's no way of accurately measuring the value of that relationship. If you cannot feel the movements and messages of your own soul, and if you do not have the courage to act on them, you'll too long stay in a relationship that's been tracking down, down, down. Or, just as bad, you'll read as overly bad something that may be quite good. The relationship needs to be left when the stock has not only been trending down for a long time, but the prognosis is similar. To put it in the simplest terms, leave when it no longer feeds your soul, or when you're grasping at straws and strings. Of course, if you're in such a state of disconnection from your own soul that you've let it get so bad for so long, it stands to reason that you fear leaving as much as you previously feared standing up for yourself when being hurt and demanding that things change. That fear of doing the hard thing of breaking up, fear of perhaps looking like the bad guy, fear of being alone, and all the attacking voices that rise up from within will contribute to someone staying in well past the freshness date printed on the back of the relationship. But in a way, you really never need to know some rule from when to quit a relationship. For there is one inevitable and unavoidable rule. It's what I call the fuck it point. If the relationship is painful, eventually the pain will get so bad that it will drive you to take action that would have been considered previously unavoidable or unwanted. Eventually, we reach a point where we just say, fuck it. I don't even care anymore. I'm so done. It may hit you in the produce aisle at the grocery store, or when on the job site, or walking to the restroom in the middle of the night. The moment of absolute clarity will come. In that moment, on that day, you will have the clarity you lacked just yesterday. And you will have the strength that yesterday you lacked as well. And if you needed to get that bad, well, that's okay. But when we get on the path of serious soul work, We don't need it to get to that point anymore. We trust our voice more and more and act on it when it is speaking clearly rather than rejecting its calling because we have so much fear or stored up past pain. I was in a session with a fella yesterday. He said he 80% knows he wants to leave the woman he's in a long-term relationship with. However, he went on to say he never quits anything in life until he has done every last thing to make it work, be it a career or a business choice. And the truth is, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, one of the things that makes it so effortless to walk away from a relationship is when you know you've done absolutely everything you can to make it work. There's great certainty that comes with that course of action. And it was certainty this man sought. He said he didn't want to be laying in bed the night after breaking up, wondering if he made a mistake. Fear of making a mistake, of not having exhausted all the options and paths such that regret might come later. Fear. Again, nothing wrong with using that as a means for navigating decisions. However, what it fundamentally indicates is someone who doesn't just trust the voice of their own soul. He knows his soul is calling him out of this relationship. He's just afraid of making a mistake. His fear outweighs his trust. He doesn't trust his own inner voice. His fear of being wrong causes him to distrust what his own inner voice already knows. Thus, needing to exhaust all paths and options before leaving indicates a person who does not have an intimate relationship and trust in his or her own self. Certainly not enough to outweigh his or her fears of being wrong, or perhaps what others might say, including the person being broken up from. When fear is driving action, it more often than not indicates a person's partial disconnect from their own self. The more we grow, trust, and act on that voice or vibe rising up from within, the sooner we detect and act on knowing something that is bad and ain't changing. The more we live in flow, the more we live in ease and happiness, not to mention a whole lot more peace. Next section. Recommendations for a healthy, loving relationship? Well, it's almost cliche to say, but the big obvious thing that is most needed for relationships to flourish is time, energy, and focus. What we give those things to flourishes. In the beginning, it is easy and pleasurable to give attention and time to a relationship, but as that new love settles into lovely new patterns, what so easily slides is the same commitment to nurturing that relationship, especially as other factors begin to play in, careers, kids, families, to name a few. If the relationship is not kept as a priority, it will wither slowly. This is the underlying mentality behind the proverbial date night for married couples. It's about the deliberateness that is necessary to sustain and grow the relationship amid all the other pulls and chaos of life. Healthy, loving relationships require deliberateness. Doing together, dreaming together, reading relationship books together, and the like all work to keep the relationship from stagnating and or to keep one or both person from stagnating inside a relationship that appears to function fine. However, that deliberateness is never more important for a relationship than when applied to the single biggest destroyer of relationships. And it ain't sex or money. Nah, the real relationship killer is unhealed shit from one or both persons' upbringing. As I discuss in my book, There's a Hole in My Love Cup, all problems in a relationship in one way or another predate that relationship. The power of parental imprinting back there is so enormous that it injects viruses inside the operating system of a person's personality and values that become so baked in that they are indistinguishable to the bearer. Those play out in every decision, small and large, in a relationship. Additionally, past loves can skew how we enter new relationships and interact in them to the point of flat out running them, not to mention ruining them. And it can be so easy to blame the other person unless we are aware that this time it may be my own shit that is causing me to act this way, because the person in front of me now has done nothing to prove that they are anything but trustworthy, kind, and loving. Hence, A healthy and loving relationship is one where two individuals have an individual life in which each is constantly growing, morphing, and becoming, and where there is support and encouragement to do so from the other. My girlfriend that I was telling you about, she and I have made this very clear in our relationship of 10 years. My highest aim in our relationship is to help her become the fullest expression of herself, even if it one day leads her away from me. Her aim is the same for me, and she states it so. Like trees with new and growing branches, we each change and expand to our greatest fulfillment. In doing so, the joy of being encouraged to do so by the other only expands. The human animal has a natural soul desire to expand, grow, and fly at full wingspan. And the very best relationships are those that encourage that natural movement toward greater satisfaction. The best relationships pick us up and hold our soul when we've been knocked down, as is inevitable in life. The happiest and healthiest relationships are those in which each person truly owns their mistakes and times they've hurt the other and moves to improve and to hurt them less. The very best relationships are those that are founded on two individuals living authentically as individuals within the context of a supportive, kind, strong, and deliberate union. I mean, let's be honest. Love is fucking awesome. Happy Valentine's Month. For plenty more videos on love, relationships, breakups, and healing self to make better relationships, go to the Badass Counseling page on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and X. However, the simplest way is to go to the page on TikTok because TikTok allows creators to catalog videos by subject matter rather than requiring you to scroll through hundreds to find the ones that are applicable on a given topic. Also, there are many episodes of the Badass Counseling Show podcast that address love, passion, dating, and the like. Go check them out. Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thanks and happy Valentine's Day.